and welcome everybody to another episode of Triple Tap. This is episode number 6. We are ploughing through these really quickly. So, Lance, Kent, welcome, gentlemen. How are you this evening? I know we've been very busy with our project team. So, what kind of a week have you guys had? Kent, do you wanna go first? Lance, you're still muted.
Well, yep. All right. Yeah, no worries. Look, we've had a fantastic week working very closely with the new video project team, media project team. Also setting up formal ways for the Australia project to reach out to other organisations. We're doing some really good work with other freedom groups across the country. So it's been a fantastic week. It's been extremely busy. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to the future with TAP and also excitingly the Street Reps to Australia program that'll be coming out. So it's fantastic, Ainsley. As you know, the work is on and it's keeping us very busy.
Excellent, excellent. Lance, how are you doing this evening? You're currently muted, so you might need to unmute yourself. Oh, okay. Let me just unmute you. I keep forgetting. Sorry, guys. Let me just see if this is going to work tonight.
I say just leave him on mute.
There we go. Let's see. Is that going to work? Little technical. There we go. How you going?
Hallelujah.
We got you unmuted. What kind of a week have you had, Lance?
I've had a fantastic week. I've slept in every day till 12 o'clock. I haven't got up. And I've done almost nothing this week and I feel awesome. So well done for everyone for not calling me and not putting me under any pressure. I love it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Well, guys, look, we are in for another exciting interview tonight. I'm just about to introduce our guest speaker. Everyone who's just jumping on, please make sure that your videos are turned off apart from our host and our guest speaker. And let's get into it because we've only got 1 hour. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce this man to you. This is the man known as Cole, the sociologist. He is the individual responsible for leading the resistance educator group, the National Education Workers, the NEW. At university, Cole's increasing ability for social research saw his analytic gaze scrutinize university policy, such as the SSAF fees misspent or political suppression by the executives. He's even tackling the powerful Australian Vice-Chancellor's Committee, the AVCC, and investigating the intrusion upon tertiary education by vested industry interests. He was also, and still is to this day, the reigning chin-up champion. Oh, we'd like to hear more about that one. 77 wide grips in 100 seconds. He's also engaging studies in original culture, law, bullying, and film and media, so very diverse. Emerging from university, a qualified secondary English and sociology teacher, Cole has since sat on the Quality Teaching Panel, the Teachers Federation and the CLAN, team building, whilst running gym programs, assisted initiatives for the Originals, handpicked, mind you, to lead the Indigenous Boys Dance Troupe. So very exciting. I'd like to hear more about that. And of course, the interworkings with Arts Council and staff wellbeing centres. At the tertiary sector, he has shed 30,000 senior academics, professors and doctors, under the cover of COVID. No JobKeeper has been extended to Australians' knowledge sector. Cole entered teaching. However, on August the 27th, 2021, the Department of Education mandated the New South Wales education workers to be vaccinated for COVID-19. And you know what? Gladly, Cole said no. And so did thousands of others. With 5 of these, Cole established the New South Wales Teachers United, and his role was chief tactician and strategist. To date, Cole has written over 100 resources for education workers and of course modified for other industries, and liberated the teacher group of the corruption that infiltrated via its first leadership team after catching those who now call themselves the NU, Mac and his criminal syndicate, embezzling raised funds totaling some $135,000, and maybe Cole will share a little bit more about that with us. So such unyielding intolerance of corruption led to natural partnership with the Australia Project, where after some months of fruitful cooperation, Cole was approached to join the TAP executive team, and we're so glad that he's on board. So now as we enter the next chapter of war, Cole will help head the charge along with other notable personalities. As tenacious as he is verbose, Cole continues to scrutinise and generate the strategies and the resources used to equip other fighters and nail those complicit in the pan-global genocide to the wall. His reputation of ferocious analysis and incorruptible methodology. To date, he has publicly challenged these fraudsters, like the likes of Mac, as we know, Mac Christian Marchesani, and the Secretary for Education, Georgina Harrison, Dr. Norman Swan, and other fraudulent money maker entities such as the Red Union. Specialising in research, the narrative activism, intervention, public speaking, and general tactics, Cole is the man who created and continues to run the TAP New School program, planning to forge a new independent system of education with the Australia Project. And we're so excited to have him on board. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we'd like to please welcome Cole, the sociologist, to tonight's call. So welcome, Cole. If you could share a bit more about the new school and how you're going with that, and what's involved in setting up a new school, and how does one get involved in doing that and creating a TAP new school in their area. So I know the guys will probably have some more questions for you, but if you could just start by giving us a little update, or what's it all about and how do we get involved?
Thank you, and thanks for having me. Look, I've been doing the tour lately, so fortunately I've got some new material since Friday. And look, I'd just like to say there's a lot of other people involved in the NEU. Yep, I'm the voice and tactician. There's some fierce fighters in there. They don't always like to be named, but they know who they are, and I just like to give them a shout out. And that we are all the NEU, as we are all TAP, right down to the micro constituents. So thanks for everyone that's still stuck into this now, the third chapter. Okay, so the new schools, they have had various iterations. I'll tell you why. Basically, I'll tell you what they are for starters. Through the TAP, the Australia Project, when I first joined up with these guys last year, and just came on board and shared ideas, and eventually, that relationship was enriched. And through those satellite communities, those postcode communities, you're immediately in touch with someone nearby, so you can do things. Everyone always talks about making farm cooperatives, etc. Well, when we started to see that they were going to send the vax bus to somewhere like Kempsey High, without telling the parents, remember what they call informed consent is your kids being on the premises. That's what they call informed consent, folks. So watch out. After that, it'll be a matter of, a bit of psychology, a bit of peer group pressure and a bit of bullying, and your kid may roll over. So I, with some TAP guys and some of the ADF boys on here as well, made a very quick determination that we had to give somewhere, create a physical space that was outside of the schools. Now, homeschooling got in before us, and there's some good homeschooling programs. However, you're not always home to homeschool, are you? So especially primary school kids who can't come to work with you. You might be able to leave your teenager at home, but you can't an 8-year-old. So we need to give those people somewhere to go, especially if mum and dad both had to work, or if they'd lost their jobs and now they're working, maybe for half their wage or 2 jobs each. So we had to give them somewhere to put their kids during the daytime. So that's how the new school started. There's various ways to do it. It's all based on the will of your community, folks. So first and foremost, get with your TAP satellite group, go make a free profile, find out who's in your area, find out who the players are, and start summoning those resources. What I mean by that is not just the assets that come with people, but the human resources, the skills, the willpower. See who steps up. Everyone is a keyboard warrior to a degree. We all are. But how that manifests in the physical realm can be a totally different thing. So you have to put it on the line, see who turns up, who's going to bring a hammer, who's going to bring a broom, and who's going to help you fundraise. So our first iteration of the new school attempted a completely charitable format. Now, we're going to become a charity to invite what's called a tax gift recipient, become a tax gift recipient. That basically means that someone can give you a donation of money or space, and get a tax refund on it. That was not going to be permissible. So we approached people. We looked for places. We looked for people in the TAP group that might have given us a space. And sometimes they are, but sometimes they don't know what they're in for. So we had a lady offer us, and you got to watch out. The first ones to step up are always the trolls, folks. So we've come across every kind of troll in the world. And let me know if I talk too long, folks. I'm sure you will. Feel free to interject. We had every kind of troll in the world come at us. People ringing the real estate agents, because after a while we started approaching real estate agents, and including fake teachers. And so when our first space was offered by who turned out to be a professional police witness. And look, sometimes the reality of 40 screaming kids turning up is more than what someone can bear, and they've got a fernery, and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we have people worried about muddy floors during the floods, for example. You got 30 pairs of little shoes, that's what's going to happen. And so we lost our first space. It was given up, and the day we were about to get rolling, it disappeared. And this all takes the momentum out of it. And a lot of people have only got so much willpower to use. And the bad guys, that's one of the things they do. That's what they're designed to do, is they're designed to kill your momentum. You know, how many false calls to Canberra were there outside of the big call to Canberra? How many false calls to Canberra were there? They're trying to use your petrol, your willpower, the last of your money. And people have only got so much in them. Now, fortunately, that was not so of me and a guy called Steve, who started the schools together. He's the businessman and the lawyer, common law guy, and I'm the educator. So our second space is going to be a big bit of property with some demountables. We need to raise $7,000 they were given the demountables. We had to get them down from Sydney, and I was going to drive the truck. I've been driving trucks for 10 years as a removalist and in the mines. So, but that fell through. So that was our second iteration. However, we worked out the whole plan to go with it. So therein, with the first space, when it's given to you, we have a model to work with that. So if you're in a TAP area and you've got someone that's designed the space, so you don't have that as an overhead, being rent or anything else, maybe just upkeep, but not rent, and maybe you've not even power, water or otherwise, then we can look at a model that suits that, because all fees will go towards what your overheads are. Otherwise, we wouldn't charge anything we didn't have to. I tried to get a rolling roster of teachers. Yes, Ken.
Cole, how many kids are in your TAP New School at the moment?
30. We got 30 little. Yeah. So we started in late March, and we grow. We grow by sometimes 2 kids a week. And we just had our first school fete. It's jumping castle, the whole kit and caboodle. And
that's fantastic.
We are blessed with some mums that make some mighty slices and spreads. I put on 9 kilograms on Saturday. All I did was eat mums slices. And God bless those mums. Yeah. So, and what that did, folks, is when I went to send the thank you out to those people from the fete, you know, because there's that classic thanks to everyone for today. It seemed weird. And I expressed this to our little community, and I said, look, it feels like I'm thanking my own family for turning up to Christmas. It seemed, you know, it seemed a bit informal or formal, when it was just like, you know, that's what we do now. And that's the love you see in your school. Now, you're going to have to go through not only iterations and the obstacles and the crazy weird breeds of troll that come, whether they were coppers, whether they were government agents, you know, or both. Let's face it, ASIO worked through all areas, folks. When this when this vaccine came out, we had these strange vaccine COVID nurses turn up to the schools. And you know, they were rough. They had big shoulders on them. I reckon they were trained. You know, so they're everywhere.
Mate, we're going to talk more about those things in a minute. I'm just curious. Sure. I know that as you're teaching the children and as they're learning, getting their education, I also hear that they're growing food for families.
You know it. So look, part of it, look, how many years has everyone been saying, we've got to get back to this, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. You know, I mean, it starts with times tables for starters. So we fix education. Teachers know what they're doing most of the time, folks. They're not bad people necessarily. There's a few left in the schools. We call them vaccinazis. And now that they've had their brain muddled by a third booster shot, some of these poor creatures, I'm not sure how straight they're thinking. They're fearful. You know, it's a survival mechanism, and they're lashing out.
But back to the garden, mate. Back to the garden.
Sorry, mate. Here I go. I always work my way back, mate. Fear not.
It's all right, mate.
Yeah. Okay. So here's your site. The site we finally ended up with was a lovely old farmhouse with horses and a big healthy mob of kangies who float through. And we have a 400 square meter greenhouse. Now, if you didn't have it, we'd be building it anyway.
Wow.
Yep. So we've done soil analysis. And I'll just send a shout out here because number one, getting a laboratory to test your soil was something that was a bit difficult because no one wanted to test your soil, which became quite suspicious in the pattern that we found there. Why does no one want to test your soil? We eventually did it. And number two, we invite the expertise of the willing community. So in they come, the regenerative agriculture centres, the farm-gate organic farmers, in they come. And we give families a plot in this greenhouse. The kids then tend the plot. You've got school houses, they're often named after sportsmen. At my school in Melbourne, it was sportsmen, other times it might be an Indigenous, an original leader or an animal to Australia or something like that. And we will have Team Tomato and Guardians of the Garlic, etc. The kids will rotate. They'll learn how to grow garlic. They'll learn how to work with the acidic soil. That becomes a science lesson. Maths go with it. Whether it's kilograms, it's a metric system. It's easy. It's kilograms, it's milliliters. We look at the idea of the hydrological cycle. That comes from the geography classroom, by the way. The hydrological cycle. I'm not sure how much the scientists do it, but we certainly study it in geography. And so that in itself reaches out to the science classroom. So we break science into two forms, basically, which is the theoretical and the practical. In other words, the stuff you learn from a book and the stuff that you put into practice. Now, a science laboratory, aside from all the OH&S and the insurance that goes with it, can be very difficult to get. But there are plenty of, kids are playing with Bunsen burners and conical flasks in high school, whereas about 0.00001, and you'll see all the step up on the STEM, STEM, the acronym for STEM, as they're trying to push to get more science and technology and engineering and mathematical students. So no one's doing it. They all want to be gamers, and just ask them. So they're learning these things in science, which are good, but when was the last time you picked up a Bunsen burner, folks? So you can actually get these kids to do practical science. We get them to learn soil analysis. We get them to learn how to, work out photosynthesis, the acidity in the soil, the idea of evaporation and how that will affect your irrigation. And so we started in geography with water. We'll go the whole year on water. We're going to talk about water in all its forms. And so when going back to that question about what it takes to start a new school, it takes the people. Now, the curriculum I'm working on, which will be signature to the new school program, secondary, primary school teachers are masters, right? Primary school teachers already teach all subjects. They're already generalist teachers. All they have to do is go back to the 1920s and start teaching maybe every kid of every age in the same classroom. We'll break them into K to 2, 3 to 6, which is what we're about to do. The reason being is because just like taxpayer dollars paying for public servants and roadworks, and which is a lesson I give the kids. Well, it's the same here. Your kids, your students are literally paying your teacher wage. Now, I tried to get teachers to work for free. I would have been one of them. If I was Mr. Monday, I would have come in. It would have been an English heavy day. I'm an English and sociology teacher. I can also do geography and history. So I might have come in, say, 2 days a week because it was my school. But let's just say if I was Mr. Monday, I came in. Monday might be English heavy. Tuesday might have been a maths teacher. Wednesday might have been science. And so on. That teacher gives 1 day a week free, and then they go off and work gainfully for the rest of the week. So I tried that. No one wanted to do it. Teachers are out there gouging. I understand they've gone and got into mortgages, and you can get $60 per kid per hour if you are tutoring. Now the problem is we get teachers coming through that seek to harvest our students. Yep, you got that right. They come through. And I remind myself of that Darren Hinch impersonation from the 80s just then. Do you remember that with Steve Isaac? Right. We had a maths teacher come through, and as he systematically started to pollute the environment, talk to mums, feed them with, because it's very easy to character assassinate. People are afraid. People are scared. Started to say I was lining my pockets. with the $100 of my own money I put in last week and the 5 weeks I just did for free. Yeah, I'm going to the Maldives next week. This guy, after continuing to do that, refusing to work with us, and he was too rigid anyway, and I'll tell you how that goes in a minute, then started to poach students for his own $60 an hour thing. That was a guy we used to call Mike the mathematician. Now he's gone out there with no working with children check, and he doesn't check it of his teachers, and he's now trying to steal people's students. He continues to try and character assassinate me. So silly. It's only working against him though, fortunately. Because fortunately I've got some information that doesn't work anymore. Yep.
So Cole, you've had, obviously by the sounds of it, so many different hurdles already and setbacks from various different things. What is it that keeps you going in creating these new schools? How important is it to get these schools up and running?
Three things. One, natural energy levels. And, my dad was a soldier and he toughened me up, just got me ready. And that's what you should be doing for your kids, folks. Get them ready. You have to scare them, just, toughen them up. With a block of wood now and then. I'm just kidding. No. Don't do that. Don't quote me. Oh, you watch Current Affair, I got that bit. Okay, so that's one. Number two is education is fundamental. Everything you do in your life is education. The doctor supposedly smacks you on the bum to teach you to breathe when you're a newborn baby, if you're not breathing already. Self-taught, autodidactic. But otherwise, they teach you everything is education. Riding a pushy, learning the language, recognizing why red means stop and green means go. There's nothing in nature that says red is stop and green means go. We have to learn it. It's socio-culturally constructed. So it's called constructivism and constructionism. So education is fundamental. And that's why I became an educator, is because for the first time in my life, I found purpose and I could, justify what I was doing. Up until then, it was all sort of philanthropy and self-service. The number three, they've given us absolutely no choice. They've given us no choice. That's what makes this whole war, while it's, if you really look at it and acknowledge it, it's horror. But outside of that, you've got no choice in the matter, do you? Because whether you roll over and die or sleep or seek escapism or the perpetual, well-being lull, and well-being's good, folks, but don't just stay there. While the war rages, you got to get back out there. Then, if they shoot both engines in your plane, which they have, one was called my career, one was called my future, well, then I'm directing that plane into their ship. I become kamikaze. They're creating suicide bombers out of us all, socioculturally, to use a metaphor. So
it's absolutely correct, mate. Those people who've driven this craziness, this COVID craziness, they're creating and fueling. First of all, they're weakening the people who would support them, and they're empowering those of us who can see straight through them for the BS that they're trying to push on us. Yep. There's no way, I would hazard a guess, that you'd be out starting tap new schools if this craziness hadn't have been forced on us. I know I wouldn't have been. So in a way, we have these domestic enemies of our country to thank for galvanizing us and strengthening us and putting us together.
Yeah.
We're in a historic point in time at the moment where the governments and their education department representatives have shot themselves in the foot so badly because so many teachers left the education departments that now the Queensland, the New South Wales and the Victorian education departments are demanding that those teachers whose careers they ruined, demanding that they return to active duty, almost like a recall to the military, as if they have a right to tell them to do this. But they're calling them back in droves, demanding that they return to work, demanding now that it doesn't matter whether they're vaccinated or not, they've got to have them in the schoolroom.
Yep.
It's a very interesting time.
Yes.
And they're demanding that those teachers undergo a risk-based assessment to see if they're dangerous to have in the classroom. Give us some insight into that, mate.
Sure. Yeah, look, I mean, okay, so they're throwing that around. Now, you may have heard someone like Alex Antic talking about stakeholder capitalism. Now, I've been focusing, I'm a social researcher, and I would have gone into, to become a full doctor and potentially professor of sociology if I could have. I enjoy it. I like language, and everything is a language. Everything is a language. We are biological language of our genetic parents, for example. Everything is a language, and through all 5 senses. And so except they killed 30,000 senior academics, as you may have heard in that introduction that I had absolutely nothing to do with. And so basically, I read into things and I measure them and I research. And now I've been chasing stakeholders recently. Stakeholders is an interesting thing. They are mentioned. It's a very loose term. It's who they decide as a stakeholder, pretty much. It sounds pretty arbitrary. So this includes unions. Now, I'll direct anyone to the Operation COVID Shield list. That's a good one. That's got a lot of the stakeholders. It says right at the bottom, after it's got sort of federal, state, there's DHL, by the way, the truck company, and the ones that are transporting all of it. And you might have seen me put up a thing about the weapons manufacturing and the shields and the et cetera, et cetera. They were called Aspen International, stakeholder. So I've been finding out who these stakeholders are. Now, this includes they're the ones that will be looking over this risk-based assessment, what it looks like. Now, one of these organizations is the Secondary Principals, I think they're called Association. I mix them up. And there's a primary schools version as well, council. And they're in on it. They're called, delegates from them. Now, they're stakeholders. Now, the risk-based assessment hasn't come out yet. They haven't told us what it's going to look like. They've said, you're welcome back, term 3. There's going to be, by the way, there's going to be risk assessments, Parliament House, Canberra. So we've got to see what they actually look like. Now, what we do is we asked for risk assessments last year. And then that's when that criminal company, Red Union, came along and started sort of trying to trademark the idea of asking for a risk assessment as if it hadn't existed in the workplace health and safety legislation for 20 years, right? So we're already doing it, which is why I knocked Red Union back when they offered me $20 per member finder's fee, which Mac did not knock back. And unfortunately, sold state and territory groups to Red Union. Now, Red Union have done another trick, what the bad guys do, is imagine if you've got all these people running to the shore, like in, say, War of the Worlds, right? They're all running to the shore, and there's Red Union going, get on our boat. And there's this other, now the Red Union boat's nice, big and shiny because they got lots of money. Well, people get on their boat and they drive to sea and they sink it. That's another thing where the bad guys do. They've done absolutely nothing, Red Union. And I've been calling them out publicly, as I have Mac, which is Christian Marcajani, who sold everyone down the river to Red Union.
Mate, I'm not cutting you off there. I want to bring you back to a term that you just said, stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah.
So stakeholder, someone who's got an interest in the education system.
Yeah,
Capitalism meaning they're prepared to make a donation to get what they want out of the education system. Didn't we used to call that bribery and corruption?
Yeah, that's right. It's the golden handshake, mate. And you can see it in some of the most glaringly obvious programs that are usually problematic in education. So you may be familiar with NAPLAN. All right.
Yeah,
so
NAPLAN, yeah.
Right. Years 3, 5, 7, 9. And it's literacy and numeracy. Now, there was a call for it. There's a need for literacy and numeracy. What had happened was they dropped, they say you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. They dropped the entry level of teaching so badly that a bunch of drop kicks did get in. Doesn't mean they didn't become good teachers, but a lot of drop kicks got in. Because when you get to university, you look at your score that you get in, whether it's your ATAR or, whether you enter via Open Foundation or elsewhere, and you look at the highest paid with the best job security, say, and teaching's there. And that's why a lot of people end up, it's called the teacher attrition rate. They'll end up 2 years in teaching because they go for the pay rate and they forget about the work and the abuse, because year nines, for some reason, year nines are worst. I don't know why. Everyone knows it. Year nines are worst. They swear at you.
So NAPLAN, how is it part of stakeholder capitalism?
So to make up for people dropping literacy and numeracy, not to mention they destroyed maths and they took out times tables. They've just come recently out and said, we've got this revolutionary new ideas called times tables. Yeah, you reckon? So, and they changed all those old-fashioned equations of, sort of adding up multiple numbers. So in came NAPLAN. Now, don't forget, NAPLAN requires materials. So NAPLAN comes with a bunch of practice books, with a bunch of sheets, practice sheets and the actual test, per year, per class, per school, all over Australia. That's $1 million billion contract. That's NAPLAN. It's tied to school funding, by the way.
Wow.
Cole, I just want to ask you a question from one of our viewers here. Would you think that they're demanding teachers to come back because of the new school? They're hearing about the new school programs and the like, and they're starting to realise that they maybe shot themselves in the foot?
Yes, I think it's an indicator. Absolutely, because they're doing things to sweeten the deal. So they've also added New South Wales and Victoria by 2030, New South Wales by 2025, an extra year of school. So basically 4-year-olds will be allowed to turn up, which they're spruiking. And this is the Minister for Education, Sarah Mitchell in New South Wales. Hi, Sarah. Was out there saying it's considered another year of free childcare. Now, that's massive as they make childcare unaffordable, let alone petrol or cabbage. So they're doing that. They've been throwing around the idea of the 4-day working week, and the ace up their sleeve is the pay rise. The pay rise they've been denying teachers that doesn't keep up. Remember, teachers have the same educational level as an engineer, but they don't have that, what they call social valorization, as in, imagine if you're trying to chat up a pretty girl with expensive shoes at a party, you think of the jobs you might want to mention, because they have social valorization. Well, teaching doesn't. It's just sort of blue collar, yet sort of white collar. So yet it has that educational level. It used to be up there paid the same as sort of doctors and lawyers. Mind you, they had really good training, especially some of the Jesuit guys. They did 16 years. But they did that because, they've been attacking education, and education is fundamental. So, yes, I think they are doing that. They are trying to get away from these community initiatives. They are trying to do what it takes to strangle them. We didn't go childcare, but we can do childcare. And this is another example of what you can do with a new school, is the nomination of things. In other words, you're naming them different than what the department may permit you. We tell them nick off, by the way. So just like the doctors aren't allowed to call themselves doctors, so they say, they're saying that about schools and teachers. Now, I wrote back to Nessa and I said, look, I'm an English teacher. I don't have to be, though. Grade 4 kid could answer this. In fact, kids at our school, grade 2 kids could answer it. And you should hear them. Unreal. Because teachers can do their job now. They're not being held back anymore. And so the school and teacher are small case. Actually, it was a phone call. I said, oh, can you spell teacher for me? I said, of course I can spell teacher. I said, okay. Is it a capital T? No. Okay. Is school a capital S? No. So it's a common noun. Yeah. Okay. So you're saying you own a common noun, do you? You own car, table? So there's another example of that ugly quasi-government influence as people seek to register terminology. So that was like Cadbury with the colour purple, that particular colour purple, which they succeeded in doing, I believe. And Monsanto, yeah, I went there and said Monsanto. Monsanto about 10 years ago tried to patent the pig. The pig. They own the pig. As they try to, breed out every other strain and breed a pig across the planet. Again, common noun, what should be a common noun. So you're seeing that market principle, invasive market principle come into education as they become quasi-government. So you'll see initiatives. So it's not just Nessa. There's a thing, I was up here teaching in the Central Coast, and they had this thing called AVID. AVID. I forgive me, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it was for smart kids and special people would come in and they'd do it. Turns out they were paying for it. And I'm sort of going, why, hang on. So the kids come to school and then they pay for this extra class. Yeah. Okay. How is that working in a public school? Again, golden handshake. Now you're seeing it come in university. Universities are responsible for this stuff. Mind you, I fought back. I fought back against all the invasive ideologies I found at university. And don't forget, this is where in that intro was mentioned the Vice Chancellors Association. They're the guys, the AVCC, Australian Vice Chancellors Committee. They are the ones that get to say whether you get to do social research or research at all. Because remember, all the research labs are in unis. And remember, Tony Abbott took out 2/3 of the CSIRO. The universities have been privatised. If you look at the University of Newcastle's council, it's full of BHP and Mercon and Mutual Bank. So again, who's on the council? Who's pushing
stakeholder capitalism. So they've got a financial interest. They can control exactly what people are thinking, what they're doing, what they're saying. They can even control every person's child that's going to that's involved in an Australian Education Department school. They can control them. They can see to it that they get lackluster education. They can see to it they can train them to be a drone, not to be a problem solver, not to be a free thinker, not to live for liberty and freedom and to have courage, but just stay in line and do what we want you to do.
Yep.
Cole, we've seen over the last, solidly over the last 20 years, 20, 30 years, the Australian government in all forms, from local to state to federal, we've seen them turn into eco-medical fascist, into an eco-medical fascist regime. They're using lies about ecosystems and the fake climate crisis. They're using fake medical data. We know it's fake medical data. The information that's coming out of Canada and Israel and the rest of Europe, etc., right now is showing that our governments knew that double vaccinated teachers and nurses, etc., were harboring hundreds of times the amount of COVID virus in their nasal cavities and in their mouths, in their oral cavities.
Yep.
They also knew that the double vaccinated staff were passing on COVID at a much higher rate, that they had far less protection from it. Right. And yet they have ruined the careers of people who simply said to them, look, this is experimental. No one knows what's going on with it. We need to see the real data before we make an informed consent. They've destroyed their careers over this. What sort of damage have you witnessed amongst people who've lost their careers? What sort of damage, mate? Houses, marriages, what?
Yep. All of the above. You're saying, look, I was removalist for 10 years and I've seen families split. It was like that. Usually it's about money. And you just saw human beings turn on human beings. That's why our teacher crew, and I see with many of the TAP satellite groups, that beautiful thing with the candlelight vigil very recently, dark to light. I went to that here and it was a very touching experience. It was beautiful. And look, I'm not a Christian, but I am spiritual. And I believe, I often say, so everyone in the room can get along, that, I often put an extra O in God. And then you can just say, good, do good, or, do God's will, et cetera, et cetera. So it was lovely. And I found how vocal the Christians are in this. And so that's been really good. Now, okay. So professionally,
what sort of damage? What sort of damage what sort of pain have these people experienced, mate?
Well, remember how much in debt Australia was. So many people were in debt. They were vulnerable, lose their house, lose their car. That's why they took it. They knew they had them. They made it easy to go into debt. So, yeah, people have lost houses. Yes, they've lost their career. Some people have been put on what's called the not to be employed. I always say the do not permit to teach list for some reason, but it's called not to be employed. It's a black mark. It's reserved for pedophiles and violent criminals towards children. Now, they have been putting us on that. The Catholic diocese, the nasty ones particularly, have been really bad in this area. And some do and some don't. Some have dropped the mandates and others haven't, for example. Independent schools have been pretty good. Steiner has gone against the teachings of Rudolf Steiner and have mandated, and I think so has Montessori. But so you've seen that professional damage as well, as in you go through ranks as a teacher. So when you come out of university, you're a graduate, or you become a casual or stuff like that. If you don't take a day off in the first year, so you do, sort of 156 working days, you become, and with a certain amount of points of professional development, PD, which is another burden, by the way, as they increase the teacher workload. to make it that you can't do it. You can't carry the burden. There's not enough days or hours in the day. So it kills that momentum, because you've got to hit what's called proficient, which is that first leg up after a year. You've got to do that within a certain amount of time. Now you've got to pay for teacher registration to be able to do it. So we wondered whether we should keep our teacher registration. But then we were worried that if we didn't keep our teacher registration, they'll use that to shut us down, even though they're going to make us pay $100 for teacher registration and not teach. So there's the conundrums that we've faced.
Well, could I just say something? Could I say something to Cath Ed, mate? Because all my kids went to Catholic school. And I think when you've got such a powerful legacy and a history of employing so many pedophiles, that it's only natural that you want to keep that going by enforcing the vaccines on the teachers as well. You know, when you're on a good thing, mate, you stick to it.
Yep. You know it.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've been sacrilegious. Yep.
Yeah, Cole, if I may ask just another question leading on from that, from one of our viewers, they're going to say that we've got a friend here in WA who's returned to teaching now that the mandates have been lifted. But of course, she's been very, very ostracised by her peers upon her return to work, very isolated in the lunchroom, upset, emotional. Have you heard of similar issues happening across the country with teachers being able to go back, even though they're not vaccinated, they don't want to be vaccinated, but they have the opportunity to go back to schools? Are you hearing this sort of stuff going on?
Yes, and that was happening in the beginning as well, and that's why they're showing such great courage to return. Now and again, the onus is upon us to be the bigger man or woman in the room, to not lash out, even though it was us that was harmed. Now we're getting that idea that people are going, "I took it and you didn't, so you know, why should I have taken it and you didn't?" It was like, because you rolled over like a bitch. You know, what are you complaining about? What are you complaining about? I just didn't work for 10 months. You know, I was on a good wage. I got a $30,000 damn HECS debt, you know? So, yeah, we're looking for that spirituality of, well, I guess unity as we return, and we need to be strategic about this. And so we're designing what I call a re-entry package. We did a re-entry package for the NEW. We released these packages that people can use, which was a way of getting back in before they drop the mandates, which some people still have to use, which was using the TARGI exemption for 4 months for having a positive rat test. We did that through Services New South Wales and New South Wales at least. And some people still have to use it. The students, some of the student teachers and the special services professionals, so those looking after the special kids, even though those kids and those professionals are in the same staff room, same school, some teachers being mandated still, others not. Even though when I was running the GIN program, had 3 or 4 of the special ed kids in my class. I was under my supervision.
Mate, so, I want to point something out here. Coming up, look, it seems as if, and we're talking about teaching, and I know this is nationwide in many other careers, but we're talking about teaching here tonight. There is a lot of court action against police commissioners, chief health officers around the country at the moment. That wonderful man, Mr. Brett Sutton, is in all sorts of trouble. We've got multiple ministers in the Victorian government fleeing the ship like the rats that they are, absolutely running because they know what's coming for them. And it seems like we're in a never-ending night. But when you see what's happening in the courts, and we've got some wonderful lawyers who've had enough of this, and they're putting together the correct information, and they're winning in the courts now. And we're starting to see people, serious government officials, lose their stuff in the witness box and be shown up for the fraud, the absolute frauds that they are.
Very easy to get
now. It is. It's becoming easier now. Now our governments, these eco-medical fascist regimes that they've turned into, have caused a massive amount of undue suffering. It appears that their actions are completely against the Federal Crimes Act, that they're against any sort of medical decency that we used to adhere to in this country. I mean, for crying out loud, they couldn't even produce a material safety data sheet for this experimental vaccine, and there was no real emergency. We know that now. The statistics, the true scientific and medical investigation is coming out to support those who chose not to take the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a growing appetite for civil action against these education departments?
Oh, yeah.
And once you've answered that, I'm going to explain a couple of things about the Proceeds of Crime Act and how that might apply to criminal activity for these mongrels.
I'll get the pen ready for that one, mate. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, there is a definite appetite. Now, on Monday nights, I created a wellbeing night, and I know I'm fairly critical of the wellbeing, but I'll tell you why I'm in two minds about wellbeing is because wellbeing is found through solutions. And that's what our wellbeing nights are. They're information shared. Anyway, on that night last night, we were talking, and I was gauging the appetite for it. And what about the civil action? Well, since the start, we have been keeping a very intense and thorough body of evidence, trail of evidence. It almost like sonar. If you imagine sonar, we're throwing these letters and these statements and evidence at every figure that appeared on the notice. It wasn't Dear Department of Education. It was Dear Darryl Curry, or it was Dear Georgina Harrison, who I wrote a 12-page letter citing the criminal code to her in December, which I just sent to a similar one to the Deputy Secretary. And this sonar comes back to you, and therefore you can see these figures. It's almost like you're throwing wet paper at them, and it sticks to these invisible people, and you start to see their outline. So there is no escape. We've created the evidence for 10 straight months. Yesterday was our 10-month anniversary. 10 months of evidence. So yeah, A, we've created the body of evidence. B, you get in court, like you say, and they go to water. I was self-represented in the IRC, the Industrial Relations Commission, and these guys were getting in there. These are Crown solicitors getting there going, no, they weren't. And they're just lying. And I couldn't believe these, even I expected more from them. They just lie. The workers' comp, for example, we sent hundreds of people into workers' comp. About 90 of them ended up going through with it. They're using 3 test cases in the New South Wales Commission. And in there, the department keep turning up with no evidence. They haven't got any. They can't, because if they show it, they're going to show that they're criminals, because it's going to show that the bioaccumulation, the biodistribution, were all, biotoxicity, et cetera, were there. So, but can the appetite, the reason why I'm asking everyone to just hold off and stay hungry for now is I believe a good indicator will be the ambulance chasers, right? So those lawyers, for starters, I'll probably start saying in their ads, but those lawyers will start approaching us saying, hey, you know what, you've got a case. They wouldn't take the case until there is a case. So we know out of workers' comp, it's going to create law. We know that, say, the Martook case is yet to be completely heard. And so from that point, and I've always laughed on these Monday nights for 10 months now, when they do something horrible, and I'm sort of the leader that laughs in the face of danger, and it's real, it's not fake. And I sort of laugh and go, that's a 3-bedroom brick home that they just gave us. They're going to sue the shit out of you. And so they may have done this to our career, but we will still have our career. In fact, we're going to get a massive amount of compensation. And then we're going to go off and build schools and return education to teachers. Rather than bureaucrats, teachers. I mean, what a revolutionary thought. And so we'll have teacher autonomy back. And I mean, I'm the school principal as such. I don't deserve it. The women who teach the primary school deserve it more than I do. But that's just, we're the ones that stood, and that's who you get, I'm afraid. It's all right, it's working out. The kids are wrestling, they would tackle me, and I come in, I steal their lunch. I've been reported to professional education standards for that, but here we can just have that Aussie larrikinism without harm, without offence. And the beauty of it is, if you get one of the sort of, I used to be a greenie. You talk about eco-fascists. I used to be a greenie in the way that I like platypuses, and I was born on the Murray. If you mess around with the Murray River and mess around with the local river, I'm going to go after you. These guys have gone so far left, and I'm up around centre now. And
Mate, listen,
Yeah.
Australians love their country. They love their environment. They love their nature. They love their animals. We love the beach, the mountains. We love every aspect of it. We love farming too. We love our country. It's a great place to be. What we don't want is hundreds and hundreds of tons of nanoparticles of aluminium and strontium sprayed into the air over us. We don't want all the toxins killing the bees. We don't want our world packed to the hilt with electric cars and batteries and all the carbon monoxide and CO2 going to the atmosphere for those failed technologies that do not work, et cetera, et cetera. The evidence is mounting against them. We interviewed exhaust control industries last week, and they've got solutions right now that bring exhaust systems to carbon negative, not carbon neutral, mate, carbon negative. We can switch to that with current technology right now, keep our power base cheap. And the government wants nothing to do with it. Now, it's quite clear that it's deliberate. It's quite clear that they won't give us any evidence around the vaccine in relation to teaching, because any evidence they can supply will prove their complicity in these. Well, it strongly appears this is absolutely criminal negligence. So with an appetite for civil action growing, with, they're doing the old Darth Vader Emperor thing. The more star systems they squeeze, the more go through their fingers, and they end up creating all their enemies, right? So that's what tyrants do. And that's why we're here. Mate, I just want to applaud you, Cole, for the work that you're doing, mate. Tap New Schools is streaming ahead. I'm so glad that, you've turned yourself into this human being that's leading the charge in education, along and backed with a lot of really awesome teachers. We recognised you as an extremely special individual who had answers for the future of education in Australia. And
thank you.
And we're looking forward to the wonderful things that Tap New Skills can turn into, and continuing the fight with us against these tyrannical dictators that we've got in charge of us. These people truly are domestic enemies of the Australian people. Yep.
Can I throw a new term out there? Because one of my jobs, you might have heard in the intro, was narrative activism and creating narratives, but narrative intervention. So we've it was the stab instead of the jab. We want to take the friendliness and the approachability out of it. I'm starting to call it pharmaceutical terrorism. Now, I hope I haven't stolen that. Sometimes you realize you got it somewhere 10 months ago, but because it's pharmaceutical terrorism. And and I just want everyone to know that if you want to build a new school in your area, get together with your TAP group. It may look like something else to mine. I was talking to someone from Penrith the other day, and the doctor, theirs is going to have a health quotient. I was talking to someone else that wants to do aged care and childcare and close the gap there. We got the oldies and the youngies hanging out. Yeah, you check it out to make sure Uncle Pervy's not one of them. But otherwise, it's a beautiful thing when you unite the elderly that just want to hang out with just anybody's grandkids. They love the joy of children. And we've gone back to that. We've got that not to be permitted to be employed list. One of our teachers is on it, not for violence or pedophilia, for not taking the stab. We don't acknowledge it. So we literally don't acknowledge the jurisdiction. We still look at, workplace health and safety and our duty of care. But if their other black marks, their idea of cancel culture, their idea of this sort of crazy, look, the far left gender stuff. Look, when you turn of age, then go love who you want, wear what you want, do what you want to yourself. Self-mutilate if you want to do it. But do not adulterate children. That's all. Just don't adulterate them. Let them be alone, right? They've got enough time. They've got enough time. They've got enough life. They've got the rest of their lives to be burdened with, with adulthood. Don't adulterate them. Let them be kids. And don't have the sexual factor. If they got two mums, that's great. I meet two mums all the time. That's great. But we don't have to go into the minutiae of the sexual nature of it. You just don't have to. It's birds and the bees stuff. Wait It's called age and stage in education. So let the kids grow up, let them have their development, right? But otherwise, love is love and do no harm.
Yeah. Cole,
Yeah,
so what I'm hearing is, sorry, Kent, what I'm
No.
hearing is that if somebody wants to get involved in a TAP News School, they obviously get involved with their TAP satellite group, and together in that community, they can find a particular venue, whether that's go out and crowdfund it or whether they get someone donating that venue, and then they can come back to you for more information about how to set up the TAP News School, how to get the teachers on board, et cetera, et cetera. Would that be a fair comment to say that's how somebody gets started in the TAP News School?
You know it. If they need me, you know what happens half the time? You get a bunch of creatives in the room and off they go. I get on the phone to them and I just go tweak, if at all, and off they go. Now, the only reason why I want them to have the TAP News School name is brand awareness. It gives us extra power. You know, I want us to become a household name. Now, whether we use it as an alliance or not, and especially you're going to find with high school, it's rather hard to get, because to be able to get 6 people, because high school teachers specialize in certain areas, you're not going to be able to afford them, because that teacher's going to want to work 5 days somewhere. So you're going to have to teach one teacher to teach most subjects. And that's where the curriculum that I'm writing have basically completed is imperative. Primary school, easy. But you're probably going to find most of your kids are primary age anyway, because the teenagers, you can leave them at home. And if you think they're studying and not playing PlayStation, sorry, parents, maybe the special kind of kid is, but most of them aren't. So you're going to probably find most of your kids at a young age. If you're going to go really young, call it a creche. Get the mums in, and literally like a bunch of elephants that look after each other's kids. Just do that. Saves a lot of money.
Cole, as TAP News Schools grow and develop and reach that level of maturity and capability where the government is forced to recognise them and also fund them, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Oof. Well, it's about, here in New South Wales, about 15 grand per year per kid. Geez, you're well informed, Ken. It's about 15 grand per year per kid. That's the funding. So that's why schools love getting kids, and that's why they actually forced kids to go to a school in that area, because it forces the money into that local economy, if you will. Now, think about it this way. You've got My Schools. If you go on the My Schools website, you'll see how much government funding the schools get. Remember, that's attached to NAPLAN. So you've got Knox Grammar here. In Melbourne, it'd be like Scots College. And they get about $20 million a year. Last I looked, that was about 3 years ago, but I'm sure it hasn't changed much. $20 million a year. This is for a school that charges about $25,000 a term. So whereas up the road, you got the local, fairly troublesome high school, gets about $875,000 a year, doesn't charge people $25,000 a term. So that's what's happening there. So, if we got that funding, we could drop our fees. We drop them anyway. Like what it costs you to get a tutor for 1 hour for one subject gets you 3 or 4 days at a new school. And we wouldn't charge that if we didn't have to pay rent. So that's how that goes. And we've got student teachers approaching us too to do prac now, as well as NDIS, specialised people looking to come and work with the kids. And if you walk in, a mum walks in and says, my kid's been diagnosed as high functioning autistic, we say, you know what, let's just try them out in the high functioning part first. Because the wellbeing centres in high schools, it's in their vested interest, here's a golden handshake, pharmaceutical, to have your kid diagnosed as ADHD or something like that, because then they start to get kickbacks, don't they? So just like your doctor does when he puts you on that certain penicillin and he gets a trip to Tahiti, the wellbeing centres, they get a bit of a kickback for having your kid diagnosed as being high-functioning autistic, and they give them extra funding to look after them. It's in their best interest, and that's a conflict of interest. We don't do that.
Yep, what we used to call bribery and corruption, we now call stakeholder capitalism, and apparently that makes it okay.
Well, that's right. They've legitimised it. Mind you, look, there's really kids with real special needs. Of course we observe those, but it doesn't mean we're going to drug them. Not first. It's not your first point of call. You tried cognitive behavioural therapy. You tried just good old-fashioned discipline. Discipline is not hitting a kid with a wooden ruler. It's strength of mind. It's repetitive, good messaging, positive role models. Kids are smart. They've got X-ray eyes. They'll spot you if you're a fraud.
So
So,
I wish
gotta be real.
I wish my deputy principal had have understood that he didn't need to hit me with that cane so many times.
Yeah, I know. Well, they just, you know what? In the 80s, when I was going to high school, you still had them left over. They weren't allowed to do it anymore, but they couldn't resist. These people were addicted to hitting kids. 20 years
Yeah.
after they weren't meant to stop, they were still whipping you. You go, you're not allowed to do it anymore. And the person was an addict.
Cole, one of our listeners wants to know: will the new schools be teaching about real finance as opposed to how to rack up credit card debt? Something
No.
which I think we wish we'd taught more about, real finance
Yep.
at school.
Yep. Well, okay. So say from the greenhouse, and that can look at you build the greenhouse. You get the tradies in, folks. Teach the kids real skills. Might be a year 10 kid, you might turn to work experience with them. Reach out to your community. We call it our soft wall policy. They are willing to do it. Aussies are good people. Most people are good people, give them the chance, especially our side of the fence. So if they're growing their veggies, they're getting to start learning to preserve them, turn them into jams, and et cetera, cook it, and that can turn to extra skills. But also we look at convection and et cetera in the science class and maths. And then they can trade with these things. And that can be as part of a fundraising thing, which adds school spirit, which we just did in our FATE as well. And so they learn basic commerce. And I teach them, like, for example, about, the kids paying for the teacher wage, et cetera. We don't have to... hide certain things, or literally, if I, as an English teacher, I've had a head teacher go after me and report me because I said what I said was undepartmental. In other words, you said something that a geography teacher should say, and information is like energy; you can't destroy it; just change its forms. So why are these people narrowing it down and isolating it into one classroom and not sharing it with the others? In the new schools, we enjoy what's called interdisciplinarity, which means that we all things are part of the same fabric of the larger, greater knowledge. Yes, you focus on them. Yes, you drill down on them. Yes, you can specialize in them. But meanwhile, you don't leave all these disembodied parts of knowledge floating in space and hoping the kid makes the connections. You can literally pick it up from class to class. So we do teach them basic commerce.
So you're teaching them commercialism, business practices, but to have an environmental and social consciousness at the same time.
That's exactly right. And how to defend against it, don't forget, to know it. You need to know your enemy to defend against it. And that's why we do in English, for example, we start with media, because we look at the tricks in media, the way that they will insinuate their ideas into you, whether you realize it or not. It's music in the background. It's the soft green colors for Woolworths, the fresh food people. Why that green, kids? Why is that green working on you, kids? Why are why do McDonald's and Hungry Jack's all have red in the color? What's that red doing to you?
Yeah.
Why is it on at 6:00 at night? And so we teach them to identify it early. And it's good. And then I say, go home and talk to your parents tonight with that knowledge, kids. And they do. And the parents come in, they thank me, sort of.
Thanks, Cole.
Because we're not.
We're getting very close. We're pretty much just over time now, Cole. So we'll just like to wrap the call up. Just one last question. One of our viewers, maybe someone who hasn't worked for quite a number of years in the teaching area, but they obviously an ex-teacher. What parameters do you have for ex-teachers being able to jump on board and be part of the new schools?
Jump on in. All you need is a working with children check, and if not, remember they're going after working with children's check, folks. So, and this is a message I'll send to everyone right now, is that we're seeing this through the messaging of some of the nasty lawyers that are coming after people. So say if you've split up, you've got that nasty dynamic where you've got the kid, but your ex-husband wants to vaccinate him. Well, that person's lawyer is saying if you're not vaccinating the kid, they may be at significant risk of harm under the Child Protection Act. They're also saying that about homeschooling, by the way. So you see what they're doing? They're trying to funnel your kids into school where they can't get away, then they stab them. They're trying to say if you don't get them vaccinated, then it's harm. And the DCJ turns up, the Department of Community Justice, formerly known as FACS, Family and Child Services, and they turn up and sometimes your kid disappears from those places. South Australia's just got the landmark case where the kid in the care, water the state, they were allowed to vaccinate the kid as opposed to the parent. Here, you can have it aired if you do an F2 or F3 form. I've got a how-to I've just done up. Shout out to Pastor Paul there. And you, to have it aired in court, because otherwise you're getting bureaucrats telling you what you're going to do. They're coming in without a warrant trying to steal your kid, and they're using vaccination as a reason. So they're attaching that to the Working with Children check. But the Working with Children check, folks, is, and this is as far as case law goes for the Supreme Courts, is it must be shown that there is a threat to the child. So that's why they're starting to assert that language. So yeah, in answer to that question, even if you can't get the Working with Children check, and this goes out to anyone else that's doing a new school, if you do, or otherwise independent school, there's some good bush schools, just go get the police check. So because the children's guardian, who are in charge of also the do not permit to teach list, not to be employed list, as well as the principals, as well as Georgina Harrison, Secretary for Education, they will try to revoke your ability at all to apply for a Working with Children check. There's a paid one and there's a volunteer one. So you do that. If you can't, just go get the police check. And because you do have to check. If you don't know the person from a bar of soap, you do have to check, folks. You've got a basic duty of care here. And outside of this, corrupt parliament, there are bad people in the world that do things to kids. So you got to look after them. That's your job.
Yep. All right, guys, it's time we wrapped up the call. Lance, Kent, you've got any last questions for Cole before we wrap up tonight's call? Cole?
No questions. Just been a privilege to be here. That's all. Sorry, Anthony.
No, you're right, Ken. As you took the words right out of my mouth, it's been an absolute enlightening session about school, and obviously there's a lot to talk about when it comes to schooling and what we can do and moving forward. And no doubt we'll have you back on, Cole, in the near future to talk a lot more about how the schools are progressing and where we're at with all that. So thank you so much for your time, your energy, your tenacity, and everything that you're doing with the new schools. We're looking forward to hearing a lot more about that as we move forward. So thanks very much for tonight's interview.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
And we'll see you same time, same place at Triple Cap next week. Bye for now.